Hi there, this is Al24 News live from Algiers. Coming up next in our news program. Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune is on a two-day visit today, Wednesday, to Tunisia in answer to the invitation of the Tunisian President Kais Saied. Also coming up, more than 1,200 people were rescued from Hong Kong's World Trade Center after dozens of firefighters put out a fire that blasted through one of the city's busiest towers, leaving more than a dozen people injured plus. Crisis in Afghanistan has worsened due to the economic deterioration, which had led most of Afghan's population to struggle with food shortage. And finally, the World Health Organization warned the Omicron variant is spreading faster than any previous strain, and it is probably present in most countries of the world. Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune is on a two-day visit to Tunisia in an answer to the invitation of the Tunisian President Kais Saied. This visit is of a paramount importance as it comes at a sensitive political and economic period for Tunisia. Algerian President seeks to move the political relationship between the two countries to a level of economic cooperation that demonstrates the extent of understanding between the two countries. And to dig more in this strong relationship, let's follow this special report by Nabil Khazini, who takes us into the Algerian and Tunisian bilateral relations throughout history.
Strong relations have always bound Algeria and Tunisia since the independence of the two countries. Tunisia was the first nation to sign the Treaty of Fraternity and Concord with Algeria in 1983. Algeria, after its independence, was associated with a number of economic partnerships with Tunisia, including the pipeline plans linking Algeria to Italy via Tunisia. $1.25 billion represents the number of trade exchanges between the two countries in 2020, which makes Tunisia one of the most important economic partners to Algeria. Algeria, according to President Tebboune, renewed the commitment of the two sides to continue to combat terrorism by activating all mechanisms on their borders, given that the security and stability of Tunisia is part of Algeria's. President Tebboune has repeatedly said that what affects Tunisia also affects Algeria, and that whoever seeks to harm Tunisia's security will find Algeria on the watch, stressing that Algeria does not accept pressure on Tunisia from the outside. The current Tunisian president, Kais Saied, declared that Tunisia and Algeria share one future, one destiny, and both countries have identical positions, share the same interests, and brotherly relationships will always bind Algeria and Tunisia. In the fight against the coronavirus, Algeria declared it would share its parts of the vaccines with Tunisia. Algeria also offered several oxygen generators when the sanitary crisis was at its peak in the two countries. Today, through the visit of the Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune to Tunisia, Algeria and Tunisia aspire to strengthen and diversify their relationships. President Tebboune's visit to Tunisia comes in response to President Kais Saied's visit to Algeria last year, in a first appearance after his election to be a president of the country, a step from the Tunisian president that comes as an expression of the depth of the relations between the two brotherly countries and between the Algerian and the Tunisian people.
Malian military take control of Timbuktu camp as French military troops ceded on Tuesday. There remained 150 French soldiers commanded by Etienne de Pirot handed a large key as symbol of giving control to the Malian army to be the last French military troop in the region. Ayadi Osama.
Mali military forces take control of Timbuktu camp after French anti-jihadist military troops ceded the area. The camp was under uninterrupted control of French military for at least 9 years. France's flag was taken down from the camp and replaced by the Malian flag in the presence of a group of Malian soldiers and the remained French troops in addition to local and UN authorities. 150 French soldiers stayed in Mali, specifically in the Timbuktu camp, since the start of the French withdrawal in April 2013. French General Etienne de Pirou, head of the anti-insurgent Operation Barkhane in Mali, exchanged handshake with the Malian new counterpart and symbolically handed him a large wooden key. Etienne de Pirou said on a statement that France will always be present in Mali, but in a different way, and he explained that this move will allow Mali to take its destiny in its own hands, but always in partnership. However, Mali commander did not make any comments. In a statement, France's military announced that Malian military has a strong garrison, which will be accompanied by 2,200 peacekeepers from the UN. Mali has been plunged in a conflict that started as a separatist movement and ended up as a civil war led by different armed groups fighting over taking control of the central and northern region. This move of withdrawing French military troops was preceded by an announcement by the French government, which stated that the latter was preparing to withdraw 2,000 military troops from Sahel region.
A resurgence of tit-for-tat violence between herders and farmers has killed at least 22 people and injured more than 30 others this week in Cameroon's far north region, prompting residents to flee to Chad. The dispute over water resources in northern Cameroon has caused around 80,000 people to flee into Chad since early December, prompting the host country to call for immediate assistance for new refugees. The Algerian Pasteur Institute has announced that the first case of Omicron variant in Algeria was detected in Houari Boumediene International Airport in the capital Algiers. The infected person was a foreign national who arrived to Algeria on December the 10th, 2021. Upon arrival, he underwent a genetic test at the arrival or at the level of the airport. In accordance with the procedures with the health protocol established by the Algerian authorities, the result has been positive. The PCR examination had to be directed to the reference detective of the Pasteur Institute, where the existence of the Omicron strain had been confirmed. The World Health Organization warned that the Omicron variant is spreading faster than any previous strain, and it is probably present in most countries of the world. British MPs have voted for further measures to battle the coronavirus pandemic, despite a sizable rebellion against the measure Prime Minister Boris Johnson's own Conservative Party. Zahra Farjani.
The World Health Organization has warned that the coronavirus variant Omicron was spreading at a rate not seen with previous strains and was likely present in most countries.
At a rate we have not seen with any previous variant. Surely, we have learned by now that we underestimate this virus at our peril.
British Parliament members have voted for further measures to battle the coronavirus pandemic, despite a sizable rebellion against measures from within Prime Minister Boris Johnson's own Conservative Party. Before the vote in Parliament, it was expected that some 60 and 80 Conservative lawmakers would vote against the government's latest COVID measures. UK Health Secretary Sajid Javid told lawmakers that Omicron is so transmissible that even if it proves to be less severe than other variants, there is still likely to be a surge in hospital admissions if it goes unchecked. His comments came as the government rushed to accelerate the national vaccination program with the goal of offering a booster dose to every adult by the end of December. UK authorities have said the number of Omicron infections is doubling every 2 to 3 days, and the variant is likely to become the dominant form of COVID-19 throughout the country in days.
More than 1,200 people were rescued from Hong Kong's World Trade Center after dozens of firefighters put out a fire that blasted through one of the city's busiest towers, leaving more than a dozen people injured. At least 13 people were taken to the hospital, with some suffering from smoke inhalation. Police at the scene, 300 people were trapped on the rooftop of the building, and everyone at the 39-story structure in Causeway Bay had been brought to safety by 5 p.m. At least 60 people have been killed and dozens more were injured when a fuel truck blew up Monday night in the Samari area near Cap Hayton, the country's second largest city. Over 100 people were reported injured in the explosion, which also burned about 20 homes nearby. The incident occurred as Haiti is struggling with widespread fuel shortages and increased gas prices, caused in part by armed gangs that have set up blockades at fuel terminals in the capital, Port-au-Prince, and surrounding areas. As a catastrophic tornado approached the city, employees of the candle factory heard the warning sirens and wanted to leave the building. But at least 5 workers said supervisors warned employees that they would be fired if they left their shifts early. The workers said that they asked their managers to let them take shelter at their own homes, only to have their requests rejected. Now, the U.S. House of Representatives voted on Tuesday to hold former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows in contempt for defying a subpoena from the committee investigation to the January 6 Capitol incursion.
The release of text on Monday night sent to former Trump White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows on January 6 amount to a smoking gun when it comes to whether those in and around the president were aware of the rise in insurrection that day and the role of then-President Donald Trump himself needed to play. The sense of panic that enveloped the former president's inner circle during the attack on the U.S. Capitol was revealed on Monday when Congresswoman Liz Cheney, vice chair of a House Select Committee investigating the riot, read aloud text sent to Meadows.
About text messages and other communications that he admits are not privileged. Members of Congress, the press, and others wrote to Mark Meadows as the attack was underway. One text Mr. Meadows received said, quote, "We are under siege here at the Capitol."
Trump, for a number of hours, even as the Capitol was being ransacked, did not think when he did finally release a video message in response to the riot it was something short of forceful. Trump's lack of a quick and convincing response is made all the worse by the clear urgency of the warnings he was getting from the people around him. The Meadows text also provided a bitter rebuke to the attempted rewriting of that day, not just by Trump, but also by his Republican enablers in Congress. The point here is a simple one. Those closest to Donald Trump spent January 6 trying to make clear to him that what was happening at the U.S. Capitol needed to be stopped.
This time, as a member of the House, should make him more aware of the potential consequences of defying a congressional subpoena.
Do we have a legitimate legal question here that we ought to resolve before we proceed with criminal contempt?
Anything. And when he did finally put out a video calling for his supporters to disperse, it was sprinkled with talk of fraudulent elections and a result that was stolen from us.
A U.S. judge has dismissed a bid by former President Donald Trump to keep his tax returns from a House of Representatives committee, ruling that Congress' legislative interest outweighed by a difference Trump should receive as a former president. U.S. District Judge Trevor McFadden said in his ruling on Tuesday that Trump was wrong on the law in seeking to block the House Ways and Means Committee from obtaining his tax returns. Russian President Vladimir Putin and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping have held a video meeting as friction persists in both countries' relations with the West. In their opening remarks at the virtual summit on Wednesday, Putin and Xi hailed relations between Russia and China, with the Russian leader declaring them a proper example of interstate cooperation in the 21st century. Iran nuclear talks have not reached a compromise result yet, as the Iranian government have been accused by the American government of slow walking the talks. The US is still insisting on Iran that if diplomacy fails, there will be different measures to be taken. US envoy to Vienna stated that Iran's nuclear escalations raise concern on the intentions, although the US has already announced its readiness of lifting sanctions. A day after the visit of the Zionist defense minister to the United Arab Emirates, the latter decided to suspend a multi-billion deal of F-35 jets that was signed earlier in the prior U.S. President Donald Trump. This comes as fractions or frustration grows between Abu Dhabi and Washington over the latter's attempt to limit Chinese technology sales in oil-rich Gulf countries. U.S. officials stated that the U.S. is still ready to execute the deal of F-3 jets and their country is still the best army equipment provider for the UAE. Crisis in Afghanistan has worsened due to the economic deterioration, which led most of the Afghan population to struggle with food shortage. On a rate of 7 out of 10 families have been restoring to borrow food since the Taliban took power of the country in August 2021. Islam Sid.
According to UN's World Food Programme, all Afghans approximately can't afford enough food to eat, and a deteriorating economy could drive Afghanistan's increasingly dire situation under Taliban rule into catastrophe next year. The WFP is boosting humanitarian operations in Afghanistan to assist more than 23 million people facing severe hunger in the country in 2022, as inflation and currency decline make it even more difficult to feed themselves. The program has also assisted 15 million people so far in 2021, with 7 million assisted in November only. Other surveys presented an approximate rate of 98% of Afghans are not eating enough, with 7 out of 10 families resorting to borrowing food, which forces them into poverty. Nadan Nashif, UN Deputy High Commissioner for Human Rights, said Afghan families face severe poverty and hunger, with many pushed into desperate measures, including child labor and early marriage.
More Afghans struggle to meet their basic needs. People in vulnerable situations, notably women, headed households and children, are being pushed to take desperate measures, including child labor, the marriage of children to ensure their survival.
On the other hand, World Food Programme spokesperson Thompson Ferry also talked about the situation in Afghanistan, in which he urged to cope with the crisis as soon as possible.
The spiraling economic crisis, the conflict and drought has meant the average family can now barely cope. We have a huge amount to do to stop this crisis from becoming a catastrophe. We cannot waste any moment.
Since the Taliban victory in August, foreign aid unexpectedly withdrew from the area, Afghanistan's fragile economy has been left on the edge of breakdown, with prices for food, gas and other daily commodities which have risen beyond Afghans' reach.
And finally, Chinese government has been accused in a report on Australian think tank of using foreign influences to whitewash the Chinese human rights abuses over Uyghurs minorities in the country. The report said China is inviting foreign social media creators to amplify content that support RPO-CCP narrators. And now it's time to have a reminder of our main top stories. Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune is on a 2-day visit today, Wednesday, to Tunisia in an invitation to the Tunisian President Kais Saied. More than 1,200 people were rescued from Hong Kong's World Trade Center after dozens of firefighters put out a fire that blasted through one of the city's busiest towers, leaving more than a dozen people injured. Crisis in Afghanistan has worsened due to the economic deterioration, which led most of Afghan's population to struggle with food shortage. The World Health Organization warned the Omicron variant is spreading faster than any previous strain, and it is probably present in most countries of the world. That's all for me, Nadia Kasmi, and the rest of the team. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.